Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz Interview Series with Jazz Multi-Instrumentalist Joe McPhee. He was born in Miami, Florida, and grew up in New York. His first recording came in 1967 when he appeared on the Clifford Thornton album. At the age of 32, he taught himself the saxophone after experiencing the music of John Coltrane. Since the late 1960s, he is well known for his free jazz work all the way up until the present day. This is a very enlightened, talented cat, so please get to know Joe and dig this interview, my friends.
Hey, Joe, thank you for taking a little minute out for Neon Jazz. I appreciate it, sir.
Sure.
And I'm going to go ahead and dive right in here with everything and ask you, just kind of in a snapshot, what's been going on with you lately?
A lot of traveling. Most recently, I was in a collaboration with Matt Scoop's son from, he's in a band called The Thing. He has an ensemble of about 12 people playing music dedicated to Little Richard and Frank Zappa.
Sweet.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, that's awesome. So Your latest album is Sonic Elements, correct?
That's a couple of years now. The latest one has just come out. It's called 7 Pieces Live at Villa Sal 1995 with Evan Parker and Donnie Glazero. Mm-hmm.
Wonderful. So let me ask you this. What's been going on lately with you as far as recordings with this one, and how are you feeling about what's been going on with recordings lately?
Well, there's a lot of stuff that's been coming out. Some of it was recorded quite a while ago, but was never released. The most recent recordings that I've been doing, I'm liking what's happening. It's allowing me to play in ways that I've never played before. For example, I'm working with a sound artist by the name of Graham Lampkin, and we just came back from Mexico City a few days ago. It was a piece for plastic trumpet and stapler, like a stapler that you staple papers together with. And he plays the springs of the stapler into a microphone with reverb and delay, and it becomes like a space instrument or something to that effect.
Wow. That's wonderful, man. That's very cool.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to go back to your lineage a little bit here. You were born in Miami and raised in New York.
Yes.
So my question to you is this. How did you get so interested not only in music but in jazz?
Well, my dad was a trumpet player, so he taught me when I was 8 years old about to play music and gave me an interest in not only just jazz but in a lot of different kinds of music. On my mother's side of the family, her uncle was Alfonso Cooper, and he was the leader of a band called the Savoy Sultans. So there was that element in the family, and also just through some friends whose parents also were interested in jazz, and so it was through that. Mm-hmm.
So when you were growing up, what jazz albums did you listen to that were very seminal for you, that really developed your love?
Well, I was a big fan of Miles Davis, first of all, and eventually I heard a piece called Pithecanthropus erectus, and that's a mouthful, by Charles Mingus. And that was the first kind of really what I would consider out music that I'd heard. And around that time also I was introduced to the music of Ornette Coleman, John Coltrane, and Eric Dolphy, and people like that. So that's what probably brought me closer to the kind of music that I'm playing today.
But early on in high school and in the military bands, you probably weren't playing that kind of music. What kind of foundation did those bands and those years give you for jazz? Well,
basically, while I was in the Army band, of course, I had a chance to play music every day and to learn theory and harmony and eventually composition and so forth. The Army wasn't so keen on improvisation because their whole thing was they give you instructions and you follow them without, deviating at all. Early on, of course, I was listening to, rock and roll and music that everybody else was. Being in the Army band also put me in contact with other musicians who had experience with jazz and so on, and it was mostly that kind of thing.
So in 1967, your first album with Clifford Thornton, Freedom and Unity, comes out. How did that feel? What was that like, that first album?
It was recorded the day after John Coltrane's funeral, for example. And I had been, thanks to Ornette Coleman, who said to me one day, are you going to go to the funeral? And I said, no. That was on a Friday. The next day was the day that we recorded that Freedom and Unity album. So I didn't have, the proper clothes. I didn't think to go to a funeral. He said, you don't need clothes, you just need to go there. So I went. And, of course, Albert Ayler's band was playing there, and Ornette Coleman's band. I heard that music. And the next day at the recording session, I walked into the recording session, and the bass player, one of the two bass players, was Jimmy Garrison. So it kind of knocked me out. How could that be possible? Playing.
Yeah. Well, when you look back, are you grateful that you did go to the funeral?
Absolutely. Not only because I was at John Coltrane's funeral, but to be also in the presence of these great musicians whose music really influenced me. People like I said, Ornette Coleman and Albert Ayler, and to be there and to hear that, it was a once in a lifetime kind of an experience. Yeah.
So, how hard was it at the age of 32 to teach yourself the sax?
Actually, I was 28.
Okay.
How hard was it? Not very hard at all. I wanted to play the saxophone for a long time, and after hearing the music of Albert Ayler, I thought, well, why not try it? The job that I had, I was working for a long time in a factory, an automotive ball bearing factory, and they went on strike, so I didn't have anything to do. I borrowed a saxophone from a friend, and 2 days later I walked into a club where I had been playing, trumpet at jam sessions and stuff like that, and I just started to play, and they said to me, this is our gig, please don't come back with that thing. So for a year, I just stayed inside, bought a book on technique with a saxophone and learned how to play it. And the next year was my first recording for CJR Records, and I hired the guys who told me not to come back with that thing for my first recording. It was sweet.
That's some good karma right there, for sure. Yeah. So during your first go-around in the late 60s and 70s at Vassar College, what was your teaching philosophy with the kids and with who you were teaching?
Well, it was basically a music appreciation course, and I was trying to introduce students to music after bebop. So, again, the music of Ornette Coleman, John Coltrane, and people like that. The experience... Well, at that time, of course, the Vietnam War was going on, and while I was teaching there, the events at Kent State happened. So it was pretty traumatic and very interesting. There was also the civil rights events were happening, and eventually, it was right after Martin Luther King had been killed, and Robert Kennedy and so on. It was pretty dynamic moment.
So you were probably weaving in a lot of what was going on in the world with what music probably was a healer for a lot of people at the time.
It was a healer, and also it was a kind of catalyst to bring people together at that time with the listening, of course, to the music of Archie Shepp and Sun Ra and people like that, and bringing all of that into the chorus as well. Yeah.
So you had not been signed onto a major label in the U.S. until the 90s. You were known in Europe and around the world. How did that come about? Was that kind of a premeditated thing? Did you mind it, or
no? Actually, I've never been signed to a major label. I started because of a friend of mine, Craig Johnson, who created a label for my music, CJR Records, and Werner Uhlinger, he's the producer of Hat Hut Records, had come to the States because he bought one of those CJR records. he found some tapes that we had recorded, but we didn't have time to release. One of those he released. It was the first recording for Hat Hut, but I don't think he had a label name at that time. It was called Black Magic Man. That was the first Hat Hut recording, and then there were several others that followed after that on the Hat Hut label. Yeah, I've only recorded actually for independent labels.
And then you've been in a lot of bands over the years, like the Deep Listening Band, Trio X. How did these bands come about, and how do they serve your music id, so to speak?
Well, the Deep Listening experience was through Pauline Oliveros. I was invited to New Music America in 1981, and she was one of the people who had been on the board there, who created that New Music America program. And it turns out that she lived near here at Kingston, New York. And so she and I collaborated for a while. With Trio X, Dominic Duval and Jay Rosen were driving down from Cadence, upstate New York, and listening to a recording that I had done, duo with a violinist. And Dominic decided that he wanted to play with me. So from the road, he telephoned me and said, "Listen, I'm a bass player, and I think we should play together." And I said, "Well, I don't have a band, so I don't think that's going to happen." And he said, "Well, you could have a band because there's a drummer right here with me." It was Jay Rosen. And I said, "Yeah, okay, if something happens, I'll see." And it turns out that John Zved, who was working at Yale at the time, had invited me to put a band together to play for John Coltrane birthday celebration that was going to be held at the Knitting Factory in New York. So I invited Dominic and Jay and another saxophone player, Joe Giardulo, and we had that quartet. The next year, I was invited to play at the Vision Festival, and I invited Jay and Dominic as the Joe McPhee Trio. And after that concert, nobody wrote about it. Nobody said anything about it, except one blogger said, "Well, the band wasn't bad, but they're probably a one-hit wonder. We'll never hear from them again." So we took that and took the name Trio X. The X wasn't political or anything like that. It was just that nobody knew who we were. So we took that as our name.
Right on. So over the years, you've been awarded quite a few awards and been recognized. I don't want to know what your favorite award was, but what one did you get to surprise you the most?
Well, 1995, out in Seattle, Washington, at the Earshot Jazz Festival, we won what was called the Golden Ear Award for the best concert in the Pacific Northwest that year. That kind of surprised me.
Right on.
Yeah.
So, you've been really dedicated to the free jazz craft for a long, long time now. When you look back on your career, how do you feel about it? How do you feel about your contribution?
That's a curious question. First of all, free jazz is kind of a strange kind of title. I don't know if it's free jazz or whatever. I like to hope that the music that I play is good music. I don't know if I could put it in a category like jazz or whatever, improvised music. I'm pretty happy with my contribution because I've been able to play with a lot of different people all over the world and make some music that's not too bad. I'm happy with it.
Right on. How has travel enhanced your voice and music? You have been all over the world. What does that do for you, not only as a musician, but as a person?
It makes me very tired. I hate traveling now, especially the airlines are horrible.
Yeah.
But I like it. I like meeting new people and being involved in new situations. It keeps me young because I'm like 350 years old now, and, traveling keeps me young.
Yeah, that's cool, man.
Yeah.
You played with a lot of people. I'm sure you've seen a lot of shows. Is there a show, if you could go back in time, that you never got to catch, or a musician that you would go back and see?
Oh, wow. I'd like to go back and see something. I saw Miles Davis, his second great quartet or quintet, whatever it was, that had Tony Williams in it and Wayne Shorter. I'd like to see that. That was amazing for me.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. Why do you love jazz?
What? Wow, you've got some questions here. Why? I guess it's because I like the excitement of not knowing what's coming next. I like improvised music. I like to think that I'm making music and not just playing music. That's, I guess, the best way I could describe that.
So, of all the fans you played for, all the fans that have bought your music, have you got a compliment from someone that stuck with you?
Yeah, I was on tour a few years ago in Bucharest, Romania, with a trio that I play with called Survival Unit 3, with Fred Lomberg-Holm, who's a cellist, and Michael Zarang, a drummer. And we had just played a concert, and we're standing out on the street, and a young guy came by, and as he passed, he said, "Nation time." And I looked at him, I said, "Excuse me, could you come here? Why did you say that?" And he had been at the concert, and he said, "Because I put that on my alarm on my when I have to get up to go to work. It's nation time. It's time to get. I can't use the expletive to get up and get to work."
I dig it.
Yeah.
So, what's the proverbial next for you? I know you're going to keep on keeping on, but do you have things that you want to get done?
Yeah, I'm just looking for the next whatever. Like you said, I'm playing with this sound artist, Graham Lampkin, and we're creating things out of nothing. We were in Mexico City with a plastic trumpet and a stapler. Now, how are you going to make music out of that? Nobody knows,
Yeah.
but we can do that. And I've got something coming up in March in London. I'm going to play a solo concert in an abandoned water tank. And I think
nice.
It's the closest thing that I can think of with Pauline Oliveros, who just passed away a few days ago, with her deep listening experience in a cistern in Washington State, with the sound of reverb and delay in such a place. I'm looking forward to that.
Beautiful. So everyone has a version of who you are, your family, your friends, all of your colleagues, those that you play music for. But when you wake up and you go out into the world, who do you think you are?
God, you too much, man. Who do I think I am? That's amazing. Well, I think I'm me. I'm a kind of unique person, like one of those snowflakes falling, like everybody else is around. And I keep looking for another one a little different. I'm just so happy to have another day to wake up and have an opportunity to start it all over again.
Great answer. Great way to wrap everything up. Joe, thank you for taking some time out. Thank you for being gracious enough and for all the music.
Well, thank you for having me, and I love your questions. Keep it going, man.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to yet another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest players in New York, Kansas City, and spots all over the world, giving fans all that jazz. And thanks to Joe for his time, his legendary status, and all that music. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino in the iTunes Store, or you can visit neonjazz at youtube.com. And for everything Neon Jazz, go to the neonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, enjoy the jazz, my friends.
Neon Jazz.